So Lama Tsongkhapa Rinpoche has said that the most important thing is to check the mind, since everything, all depends upon the mind. So when he says all depends upon the mind, this indicates how important it is for us to have the right motivation, to adjust the motivation. Prior to engaging in any activity, the motivator, really what makes us do this or do that, is our motivation. So the thought arises, oh, I should go here, I should go there. No, instead I should do this or that. So all of this, any activity that we undertake, depends on the motivation. Therefore, if we can adjust the motivation correctly, if we have the right motivation, with the right motivation, we will engage in the right activities. When Rinpoche says, since all depends on the mind, he is referring here to that everything that we follow in terms of your attainments, so higher perception, the paths, the realizations of the path, all of this depends on the mind. So here we are at the beginning of the class. It's very important that we adjust the motivation correctly with a good, proper, healthy motivation. Whatever activity we will do in the next 1 or 2 hours will be well established. It will be a good activity. And this is great benefit for us, isn't it? It's profit, it's benefit. So let's adjust the motivation properly with Refuge, Bodhicitta, and Gante Lagema. Okay, so today we have a little bit left over, or, a little bit of material remaining to present in terms of these two things, the prime cognition and the subsequent awareness. So Geshe would like to speak about that. All right, so first of all, let's talk about the prime cognizer, also translated as valid cognizer. So for the prime cognizer, we say that the most common definition that we give for this is that which is it's a cognizer or an awareness that is new and incontrovertible. Okay, we say that this is a definition that is prevalent in the schools from the middle way autonomy and below. However, that doesn't mean that all the schools from middle way autonomy and below accept this definition. We have, first of all, the exception here of the Great Exposition School. The Great Exposition School does not accept the part of the definition that says that it is a cognizer, it is awareness, because for them, valid or prime does not have to be awareness, because they posit the sense powers, for example, such as the eye sense power, the ear sense power, and so forth, as being prime. So for them, prime doesn't necessarily need to be an awareness, a cognizer. So this is one exception. Then we say, okay, so if you take away the Great Exposition School, let's say all the other schools from Sutra School up to Middle Way Autonomy, inclusive, they say it is new and incontrovertible cognizer. Okay, and then we come into the Middle Way Consequent School. The Middle Way Consequent School says you don't need to say it is new. All you need to say is that it is incontrovertible with respect to its main object. Okay, so as you can see here, already we have 3 deviations in terms of defining what is prime. We have the Great Exposition School that says it doesn't have to be cognizer or awareness. Then we have a range of schools up to the Middle Way Autonomy that say it is new and incontrovertible cognizer. And then we have the Middle Way Consequence, where it says that you don't even need to say that it is new. Here in this presentation, mainly we follow the definition of the Sutra School. So our definition is new and incontrovertible cognizer. Mm. So we have understood, or we have explained what is the prime cognizer. And let's look now at the next important thing, which is the subsequent cognizer. Part of the definition of the subsequent cognizer is that is a cognizer which realizes what has already been realized by a former prime cognizer inducing it. Okay, so that actually says very clearly that is induced or it comes through the power of a previous moment. Okay, let's look at this definition on the basis of an example. Let's say you have I awareness realizing the vase, and we want to look at the second moment of that I awareness realizing the vase. So this second moment actually is induced by the previous moment, which was the first moment, the very first moment of I awareness realizing the vase. So this very first moment is the prime awareness that has the power to induce the second moment. Okay, the second moment still realizes the object, but we want to understand how did we arrive into this second moment. Obviously, there are two things implied here: uninterrupted continuum, and the first moment has the power to induce the second moment. So when we have this type of awareness, we are talking about subsequent awareness. Okay, so part of the definition is that it comes by a former prime cognizer that is inducing it. So the important thing to understand here is that we describe a situation where the former prime cognizer that is inducing it and this second moment come in an uninterrupted continuum. So we must have continuity. But we say that even as we describe this, there are actual variation or there are exceptions that we need to understand. So, for example, this is something that is applicable of the uninterrupted continuum in the case of sense direct perceiver, in the sense of in the case of self-knower, and in some cases of mental direct perceiver. So what do we say by this? That when you have those cases, and we gave the examples last week, you come in, you see the flower for the first time, the first moment is the prime cognizer, and then if you keep looking at it, the second, third, fourth moment become subsequent cognizers. So in this case, it is uninterrupted continuum. However, if you interrupt the continuum, if you look away, if you leave the room and so forth, when you come back, right, and you look at it again, it's not subsequent cognizer. You will have to have a prime cognizer and then followed, if you keep looking at it, by a subsequent cognizer. So that's the, let's say, the general presentation. And then we have other cases. We have yogic direct perception, and also we have inference. So let's see what happens in the case of inference. In the case of inference, so for example, you're meditating on sound is impermanent. Okay, but you stop, you finish, like you stop the continuum. The thing is that when you come back and you re-engage, sound is impermanent in this case, even the first moment that you get is subsequent cognizer. Okay. Other thing also with the yogic direct perception, the same thing, you come back, even the first moment is considered to be subsequent cognizer. The other thing that we mentioned is recollection. Okay, so you see something for the first time, all right? You see the actual location, you see the house for the first time, and then you remember that house, whether it is the next week, whether it is the next month, whether it is the next year. Okay. I'm getting a phone call from you.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, because the line broke, like we couldn't hear your voice at all about like a minute ago.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. I will. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So where shall we? Are we doing the exceptions or the general case? How much did you hear?
Actually, it's the whole thing, right?
Okay.
Inference.
Did you hear about the inference or the yogic direct perception or memory? Did you hear about those three?
The inference.
Okay. Okay. So you heard the inference.
Stop there.
Okay. Stop that inference. Okay. So in the case of inference, all right. So let's say you have inference where you're realizing that sound is impermanence. Okay. And now you stop, you interrupt that continuum. All right. And then you come back and you re-engage. Sound is impermanent. So if we were to go according to the general case, when you come back after the interruption, the first moment would have to be valid awareness, and then from the second moment onwards would have to be inference. But in this case, when you come back after the interruption, even the first moment is considered to be subsequent awareness. The same thing is with yogic perception. Because it is arisen through the power of meditation. The other case that we mentioned is memory. So in the case of memory, you have an experience, or let's say you go to a place, you see a place directly, you see the house directly, and then you go away, and a week later, a month later, even a year later, when you remember that house, the memory, okay, even the first moment of the memory is considered to be subsequent awareness. So these are the exceptions. Okay, so as you can see here, obviously we can have a subsequent cognizer that is from direct perception, from mental perception, from self-knower, and from yogic perception. So the thing is that in the case of sense direct perception and the self-knower, okay, in order for all of them, we don't have a problem with the first moment. Okay, the first moment, we're going to call it prime awareness. The point is what happens from the second moment, and whether the second moment will be called subsequent awareness if the continuum is broken or unbroken, whether that affects the situation. So for the sense direct perceiver and for the self-knower, the first moment is valid awareness or prime awareness. Then if you do not interrupt the continuum, so it must be uninterrupted, and you make it to the second moment, then that second moment is called subsequent awareness. So for these two cases, it is, clear text case scenario, okay? But you need to have uninterrupted continuum. If you have an interrupted continuum, the second moment becomes subsequent awareness. However, we said that if it becomes conceptual mind, and here we started talking about memory. So whether this memory is a memory that remembers something that came from direct sense awareness, or something that came from inference, or something that came from another experience, from your meditation and so forth, as long as it is conceptual, as long as it is memory, in this case, it doesn't need to be unbroken. Even if it is broken, we are going to say that we recognize that moment as being subsequent awareness. Okay, so if you go into page 86 of your book, you will see it says, this is because in Dharmottatta's the correct, so here the correct is the name of the text. There are two of those. One is the more extensive and the other one is the more condensed. Okay, so this must be the more condensed ones. Okay, so this is because in Dharmottatta's the correct, it says the following: the two, the first moment of direct perceiver or an inferential consciousness are prime cognizer, but later moments which do not differ in establishment and abiding and are continuations of them are forsaken, being prime cognizers. Sameness in establishing and abiding on this occasion is said to refer to sameness of effect. So here we have a very important statement. All right, it says they, it says they are, later moments which do not differ in establishment and abiding and are continuations of them. So this expression, they are continuations of them, basically, he's allowing us to see that there are different types of continuations. Basically, he's making a distinction between that which is arisen through the power of meditation and that which is not arisen through the power of meditation, because each one of those cases has a different continuation. So for some is broken, for some is unbroken. Okay, so going back into the definition of subsequent cognizers, in the actual definition, we have this expression that says by the former prime cognizer inducing it, right? So that is one way, that is one thing to keep in mind. And then we had the other expression that is very significant from Dharmottatta's, the correct, where it says they are continuations of them. So where he says they are continuations of them, he is actually making different types of continuation for the direct perceivers, for conception, for memory, and so forth. So if you can keep those unmixed, if you can keep those in your mind, that will be very helpful. The example that Geshe has given here is, if you have gone, for example, to Dharamsala, if you go to the money corner, there is an area there where there are many money wheels, okay? So what you do is that you spin the wheel. All right, so the initial spinning, so you give it, you push it, you give it a whack. So the initial spinning that happens is through that initial power and that initial force of your hand. And until that power declines, the wheel keeps spinning, isn't it? So we are talking here about a similar thing. So until the initial power, the initial potency of that first valid awareness declines, for that long, you can say that you are generating or that you're having subsequent awareness. And you can see this also with memory. So for as long as you remember that thing, that initial thing, you still have the memory, which is the subsequent awareness. Okay, so as you can see here, we're talking about prime and subsequent awareness. So the straightforward, as we know, we have 4 different types. It can be from in terms of the sense perceiver, the mental perceiver, the self-knower, and yogic direct perceiver, isn't it? the most straightforward way of defining this is to say that the first moment of all of those is going to be prime awareness. And then the second moment of those is going to be subsequent awareness. All right. It should be straightforward. So Geshe was saying, with this simple rule, if I were to ask you, give me an example of prime awareness or an example of subsequent awareness of sense direct perceiver or mental direct perceiver or self-knower or yogic direct perceiver and so forth, any of those, would that clearly, easily come to your mind? Do you feel confident? Do you get it? What is the prime and what is the subsequent? Okay, Geshe says, if that is the case, to give me a few prime types of awareness. Tell me how many types of prime awareness. Give me examples. So Geshe was saying, okay, so the first moment, the very first moment that you have a realization, whether it is direct realization, whether it is self-knower, whether it is yogic direct perception, whether it is inference, the very first moment that you have the realization, all of this is prime awareness. Okay, then from that moment onwards, we want to see if the second, third, and fourth moment, etc., come in an uninterrupted continuum or interrupted continuum. All right, so what falls in the uninterrupted and what falls in the interrupted? For subsequent awareness.
Hi Voula, hi Geshe. For uninterrupted, it's mainly like yogic direct perceiver or in memory or inference, where after we try to do a meditation or by memory, those are all considered as subsequent. But if there's any case that we, let's say, for example, look at a vase and we look away, when we look back at the vase again, that is considered a prime cognizer rather than a subsequent, because that one that's looking away from the object.
Well, I'm sorry, can I pick up in the first, when you gave the first group, okay, which you identified the group correctly, did you say interrupted or did you say uninterrupted?
The first one is, okay, I'll say it again, right? For inference, yogic direct perceiver and memory wise, when we are doing a meditation or when we remember a memory, when we come back to that object itself, is considered as subsequent.
Yes. Okay.
Right?
So you are calling this interrupted or uninterrupted continuum?
It is uninterrupted, I believe. Interrupted.
Okay. So yeah, let's just clarify this. Okay. So let's say we are dealing with inference. Inference is a type of mind that in order to generate inference, you have to sit down and think about quite a lot of reasoning, isn't it? It relies upon reasoning. Therefore, inference is a type of mind that you can say has arisen from meditation, in the sense it has arisen from familiarity, isn't it? Okay, so you have that inference, you have that realization. Then you know, let's say you have the realization sound is impermanent. Okay. Then you think about something else, you do something else. You come back the next day and you think again, sound is impermanence. Now, there has been an interruption. You have not been meditating continuously for 24 hours. So this is what we mean an broken continuum, right? So you had a break. Okay, from yesterday to today, there is a break. However, when you come back the next day and you think, or you remember what you were doing yesterday, and you think sound is impermanent, this, from the first moment, is going to be posited as subsequent awareness. It is posited as subsequent awareness because the power of your memory, the power of your familiarity still remains. So you could say the power of yesterday's familiarity remains. However, there is an interruption in terms of moments, isn't it? So this is a broken continuum, just to clarify this. Okay. Same thing with memory. You go, you visit a location, and then you remember the location. Okay, where does that, you remember the location the next day, the next week. So obviously this is a broken continuum. It's not happening. You're not still looking at it. You looked at it, you stop, and then later on you have memory. But from the first moment of memory, we say that this is subsequent. Why do we say it's subsequent? Because what is it that has brought about this memory? It is the power of your eye awareness. It's the power of your direct perception. Because you had that direct perception, that has the power to generate that memory. However, there is a broken continuum between the moment of actually seeing the location and the time of remembering the location. Okay, so this is what we mean broken and unbroken continuum. It has to be with has to do with the time sequence. So another example, a year ago, you went to your birthplace and you looked at your house, okay, over there. And the fact that your eye awareness looked at the place, your eye awareness looked at the house, that eye awareness, whatever it perceived, the power of this, of the perception of the eye awareness is capable of generating a memory within you, okay? So a year later, you remember that location. A year later, you remember that house. You go to sleep. You wake up the next day, you still remember the house. You still remember the place. So obviously this memory is subsequent awareness, okay? It's not the first moment of experience, it's subsequent awareness. What has the power to induce this subsequent experience? The power of your eye awareness, of the perception of the eye awareness. As long as that thing does not decline, for that long, you can have the memory. So that's why Geshe was saying, I gave you the example of the money wheel, okay? So the first spinning, the push that you give to that money wheel brings about the first spin, but then we see that it keeps spinning until the power of that push is exhausted. So for as long as that pushing force is still there, it will keep spinning. So as long as the power of that first encounter is still there, it has the power to generate subsequent awareness.
Geshe, I have a question down here. What happened? You were saying that based on the memory or the yogi's mind, once you do the meditations, the informations that acquire and subsequent to it, whether interrupted or uninterrupted, is considered as subsequent. Now, my question here now is, what happened after the break? I went out, I opened my eyes, I was reading my text, I found new informations. And I went back to the meditations, like for example, water is impermanent or whatever is impermanent, an impermanent subject. I go and read certain text through my eye sense, I acquired new informations, and I moved back to the meditations, and I'm using new informations with also previous information memory and do my meditation, does it consider as subsequent or does it consider prime now?
So Geshe was saying, you think it's a new meditation the next day, but actually it's not. It is subsequent. It's subsequent awareness. The fact that you're able to meditate on the second day, let's say, of your retreat, is because you meditated on the first day. And when you meditate on the first day, whatever was the subject of your meditation, sound is impermanent or whatever, you develop some familiarity. Now, the familiarity or that power of meditation, it doesn't matter how small it is, that you developed on the first day, yesterday, this is the one that is supporting today's meditation. You might think that today's meditation is clearer, is stronger, it's better, it has a deeper understanding, and you think it is new. No, it is not new. It is the power of yesterday's meditation that supports and actually pushes, improves, enhances today's meditation. And it happens like this, session after session after session. There is no new power. It's not that today's meditation is unrelated to yesterday's meditation. And whatever comes into your mind, whatever clarity, whatever realization, whatever understanding, it comes from a power of the mind that it is only today, it is fresh today, it didn't exist yesterday. If you didn't have yesterday's meditation supporting you, you would not be having that increase in power today. So, for example, when we talk about the different paths, path of accumulation, then you come to the path of preparation. The path of preparation has 4 stages. And as you go from the first to the second to the third to the fourth, you are improving it. You are perfecting it. It's becoming better and better and better. But if there was no continuity, if the previous state did not support the next, how would it become better? How would you have, just, okay, you just meditate, nothing you've done before is going to support you. You meditate and it's new, and now you must find the power to do it all. There's no improvement in this way. It doesn't happen this way. Okay, so actually, if we look again into this passage on page 86, that we have this quotation from Dharmottatta's The Correct, okay? So it says, later moments which do not differ in establishment and abiding, and are continuations of them, have forsaken being prime cognizers. And then he actually explains this thing a bit more. And it says, sameness in establishment and abiding on this occasion is said to refer to sameness of effect. So what does it mean to have sameness of effect? Okay, we say that there is something in that acts initially, right? So it could be a yogic direct perception, it could be inference, it could be self-knower, and so forth. Whatever is there initially, the prime has some function, right? It does something. It has some experience. It does some activity, and it has some experience. For as long as the power of that continues without decline, then whatever will be produced from that will have the same effect. Okay, so this is the sameness of the effect. It means it is produced from this continuum of the activity. Okay, if it is produced from the continuum of that activity, you don't need to worry. You just call it subsequent awareness. So what we're saying here is with subsequent awareness, sometimes you have broken, I'm going to use the word time continuum, and sometimes you have unbroken time continuum. But as long as it is the result, the effect that comes from this uninterrupted or undeclining initial activity, if it is the effect of that undeclining initial activity, then definitely it's categorized as subsequent awareness. In this case, when we talk about subsequent cognition, subsequent awareness, subsequent cognition must come from an activity, a continuum of activity, the activity that has not declined. Okay, so we said that here the one sort of doubt or discussion that arises is about the second moment of omniscience. So if we go straight according to the definition, if it is second moment, it would have to be subsequent awareness. And in particular, with that point that we describe, since the force of the activity of the first moment has not declined, and it creates an effect out of that, then the effect, the result, which is the second moment, should be subsequent awareness. So why do we say that we don't have subsequent awareness in the omniscience of the Buddha? Because, you know, according to what we were saying here, we have undeclining power of activity of the initial function. Okay, so we are looking here at the second moment of omniscience, and we say the second moment of omniscience of a Buddha is not subsequent awareness. Why? Because it has not given up being prime awareness. All right, so it is still prime. It has not given up being prime. And therefore we can say that it newly realizes the object. It newly realizes the object, and it has the full power to newly realize the object on its own. It does not have to rely on the realization of the previous first moment of prime awareness in order to realize the object. So as we said, there are actually two ways of interpreting this term, the pramana or the tsema in Tibetan. One is to say newly, and newly in the sense of being the first. Okay, if you are the first, you only can be the first moment. But the other way of understanding newly is by understanding that you don't need to rely on a previous valid awareness, meaning you have the full power yourself to induce this realization. You don't need to be supported by the realization of what the previous valid awareness had. So because you don't need to rely, you don't need to be supported, you don't need to be improved by whatever the previous moment, first moment did. For that reason, even though it is second moment, we're talking about omniscience here. So even if it is second moment, it is posited as prime or valid awareness. It is not subsequent. So we have to be consistent here because we have to follow the rules. We said before that if you are the result of the activity of the previous activity, the activity of the previous moment. In other words, if you need to rely on the activity, on the power of the realization of the previous moment, then you have to be classified as subsequent awareness. But here, you don't need to rely. You're independent because you have full power to have this realization on your own. Another thing to keep in mind, since we are talking about omniscience awareness of the Buddha, we said that if we're talking about subsequent awareness is the result that comes from the activity of the realization of a previous mind, and that activity of realization has to be undeclined, right? Should not have declined. So when you say that I had a realization before, I have the activity of the realization and it should not decline, this actually means that you are relying, when you use the word activity, it means you're relying on the effort of that activity. It means you're relying on the effort of the previous moment. So if you rely on the effort of the previous moment or an earlier moment, then you're called subsequent awareness. But when we talk about the omniscience of a Buddha, the thing is that when you reach a state of Buddhahood, everything is spontaneously and effortlessly accomplished. It means there is no effort. You don't have to rely on any effort. It is effortless. So by mere fact that this is the omniscience of the Buddha, that is spontaneous and effortless, we can, overcome this point. So it's not subsequent awareness. It doesn't require any effort. Now, you can see here we are describing all the moments in the continuum of omniscience, first, second, third, fourth, whatever, as being valid or prime awareness. They are not subsequent awareness. We can look at other descriptions, other definitions of what it means to have prime awareness. And another way that this is described is it is a type of awareness that is able to assess and determine its own object through its own power. So when it says there to assess and determine, it refers to what inference does. So remember we said in the case of inference that you go through a point where you're cutting off. So you have to cut off or you have to negate what it is not, and then you have to establish what it is, isn't it? All right, so there is all this activity of properly assessing, negating and establishing the object. So it says, if you can do this through your own power in relation to whatever is the object that you're realizing or you are assessing, then you are called valid awareness. You're called prime awareness. You are not subsequent awareness. So we can see here that when we're talking about subsequent awareness, it means you have to rely on a mind that has come prior to you, and you have to rely on the effort of that previous mind, whatever that mind, whatever effort that previous mind did in order to have this realization, you have to rely on this. If you're doing those things, you are subsequent. But here you're not doing any of this. As it says, through your own power, you are able to do, negate what it's not, establish what it is. No, you are doing all this on your own. So you are prime, you're not subsequent, okay? So this is a very important point. And then it continues in that description, is saying, and this is because it is incontrovertible with respect to its object, meaning is spot on, is totally correct with respect to this object. It has the power to correctly understand this. So this is something that happens with every moment, first, second, third, fourth, forever moment of the omniscient mind. It would be a great mistake to say that you have subsequent awareness in omniscience, because it will indicate that it relies on effort, that you have to rely on previous moment, and it takes effort. So that would be a big mistake. Okay, so you can see actually here why we are presenting prime cognition and subsequent cognition together, because once you present them together, you gain clarity with both of them by comparison. They're like a couple that come together, and you can understand them better together. Okay, so let's look now at different types. Let's look sort of like classification of subsequent cognizer. You can have sense subsequent cognizer, mental subsequent cognizer, self knowing subsequent cognizer, yogic subsequent cognizer, and subsequent cognizers that are not mentioned in this occasion. Okay, so we can make five categories. Okay, for all of them, you can say the easy answer is it will be the second moment of whatever. So in the second moment of sense direct perception, whether it is like eye direct perception or ear direct perception or nose direct perception, of tongue direct perception, of tactile direct perception. If it is the second moment of this, it will be different types of subsequent direct perception, right? So as you can see, there are many types of this. Then we come to the second one, which is mental direct perception. Okay. Now, for mental direct perception, we have one that is mentioned in this occasion and that which is not mentioned in this occasion. We say that when you have subsequent awareness, you must realize your object. But the thing with mental direct perception, in the case of ordinary beings, in our continuum, it becomes an object that appears, but is not ascertained, because the time duration, we're talking about it appears for a very short duration of time, so we don't have the capacity to ascertain it. So in this case, if it becomes awareness to which the object appears, but it's not ascertained, it cannot be classified as subsequent awareness. What is the one that is not mentioned in this occasion? It is something that exists in the continuum of ordinary beings, such as, for example, higher perception, clairvoyance, and so forth, knowing the previous lives, or having the divine eyes, and so forth. The second moment of those are classified as subsequent awareness. Okay, continuing with this list, the second moment of self-knower and the second moment of yogic direct perceiver will be classified as subsequent awareness. And as we say, we have a fifth category, which is subsequent awareness, which is none of the four that we have already mentioned. So this is subsequent cognizer that is conceptual, and we can have the one that is induced by direct perception or the one that is induced by inference. The one that is induced by direct perception, because we can have different types of direct perception with the eyes, the ears, the nose, and so forth. We have 5 of those types. So we can have 5 types of conceptual subsequent cognizers that are induced by direct perception. And then the very last subcategory of this category is again conceptual, a subsequent cognizer that is induced by inference. So the second moment of that. So you can see actually here when we give the second category, which like you can say that you can have subsequent cognizer that comes from the direct, and we have the 4 categories of the direct: the sense, the mental, the yogic, and the self-knower. So that is one category. Then we have the subsequent cognizers that are not direct, are not those. And what we have in this category are the ones that are the conceptual. And we say the conceptual are 2, those induced by direct perception and those induced by inference. Both of those are memory. So we have many types of memory here, 5 for the first category and 1 for the second category. And then again, we have another category, you could say it's a third category, of something which is neither the first, it's not direct, nor the second, which is conceptual. So there's another type of subsequent cognizer. And what is this? The second moment of valid awareness. Okay, you cannot call it direct and you cannot call it conceptual. And therefore, is another category. So Geshe says, I think that this categorization summarizes it, all these types of subsequent awareness. Okay, so this is something to keep in mind in debate, because your opponent might throw it in order to make you give the wrong answer. So usually when we talk about the second moment of something, we classify it as being the second thing. So for example, you have the first moment of the vase, that's the vase, isn't it? The second moment of the vase is still the vase, yes? The second moment of the pillar is still a pillar. The second moment of I awareness is still I awareness. The second moment of omniscience is still omniscience, isn't it? So up to here, you would say yes, 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 yes. And then in this string of yes, someone would throw there, oh, and the second moment of valid awareness. So don't be fooled to say yes. The second moment of valid awareness is subsequent awareness. Okay, so in this way, from the sevenfold division of awareness and cognition, we have covered the first three. The first three are more important because they are types of mind that realize their object. We have done direct perceivers, we have done inferential cognizers, and we have done the subsequent cognizers. All of these realize their objects. So the remaining four in the list are types of mind that do not realize their object. Since they don't realize the object, they are not so important. However, it is important for us to go through them because we need to understand, oh, okay, this type of mind realizes the object, this type of mind does not realize the object. So what are the remaining four in our list? We have correctly assuming consciousness, correct assumption, in other words. Number 5 will be awareness to which the object appears but is not ascertained. Number 6 is doubt, and number 7 is wrong consciousness. So as we say, with those, they're not very important because they don't realize the object, but we will explain them. Okay, number 4 is correct assumption. Okay, so here the scholars we have two ways of explaining. Some say that correct assumption realizes its object, but we have to say this is the minority, whilst the majority of scholars say correct assumption does not realize the object. We will begin by presenting this position that says that correct assumption does not realize the object. Okay, so as we say, the first 3 types of mind are very important, and because they realize the object, and Geshe said I put quite a bit of effort here to clarify, to explain this. Okay, so let's come into this second part, this type of awareness that does not cognize the object. As we say, with correct assumption, some say it realizes, but is not certain. Others says, no, it doesn't realize. So we are going to start with this position that it does not cognize, it does not realize the object. Okay, so the term in Tibetan that we translate as correct assumption is like this. It's again 2 syllables, yi, zhe. So the yi is it means mentality, mind. Okay, so far so good. The second one, the zhe, it means to decide, to conclude, to determine. So that mind, it's a type of mind that makes a decision and says, it is like this. I believe it is like this. Okay. Whether it is true or not, this doesn't matter. It is a type of mind that has made a decision. Like, I've made up my mind. It is like this. So the decision that is made here, we are not saying that it is made by prime or valid awareness, right? It's just a decision. That mind has made a decision. So this is the assumption. All right, so Geshe was saying with continuing onwards from the remaining types of mind that we have, because they're not so important, we will not go into great detail. Geshe says I will gather, summarize the information. Okay, but first of all, let's look here at the definition of correctly assuming consciousness. If you go into page 92, is at the very top of that page. So it says the definition of a correctly assuming consciousness is a knower that does not get at an object with respect to which superimpositions have been eliminated, although it adheres pointedly to the phenomenon, which is its principal object of engagement. All right, so we have a few important things here in the definition. We have its principal object of engagement. We have the fact that it adheres pointedly to that. So it means it has made up its mind. All right. But at the beginning of the definition, it says it has not got yet to the object with respect to which these superimpositions have been eliminated, because this process of correct elimination happens through valid awareness. So it's not an object that has reached that conclusion through analysis of valid awareness. And it is a mind that is conceptual. Okay. Okay. Actually, we are coming to the end of the session, and Geshe has just given an alternative definition, and this definition is not one that we have in our text. It's a definition that comes from Jetsun Losang Taiyang, and every part of the definition eliminates something, and by eliminating this, that, and the other, at the end, we come to understand much better this correct assumption. So it talks about it. I can actually write down the definition. I will send it to you, and then we will talk about it next time because we run out of time. Geshe says best to do it next week.